It is officially hoodie season, and on today's show, we're talking all things digital art and fashion. To help me break it down, we have Colby and Seedphrase. I'd probably choose one of your two hoodies over this one for the daily use. We talk CryptoPunks, we talk their own collecting philosophies.
When I discover a new collection that I like, I always want the rarest.
Generative art versus AI art.
Generative art will have a place similar to how photography affected the future of art.
This is a great show. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Vaulted by Proof. I'm Eli Scheinman, Director of Art at Proof and Larva Labs, and it is hoodie season. Fall is upon us, and we have a show that's focused on some great fashion, digital art collaborators and creators. First of all, want to introduce Colby, founder of Merch, amazing collector, and all things digital art fashion. Colby, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Really excited. And then we have Seedphrase collaborating with you, Colby, on this upcoming release, wearing one of the hoodies, I think. And then, of course, just amazing collector and entrepreneur in and of himself. Welcome, Seedphrase.
Thanks for having me. Excited for this podcast.
Okay, so we've all got our hoodies on. I think I have a season 1 or drop 1. You guys both have drop 2 hoodies on, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We have dropped 2. Yeah, you're rocking a Genesis, which, by the way, the combination you have is really killer.
Epic.
Yeah, epic for sure. I mean, transparently, I'd probably choose one of your 2 hoodies over this one for the daily use. But for this show, I had to toss it on, of course.
Yeah, you have an opportunity. This is
just
coming
to have a job coming up.
For sure. And we will definitely dive into all of the details on the upcoming release. But first, I want to zoom out a little bit. You know, this is a show about collecting and creating. And so I want to sort of locate the release and the work you guys are doing in a slightly broader conversation. So let's start on the collecting side, and maybe Seedphrase, coming to you first. Let's go into sort of your recently collected or pick of the week. What artwork, what collection do you want to share?
Yeah, look, as most of you know, I've been collecting a lot of AI art recently. So this one has been a difficult decision for me. But, one artist that has really stood out for me is Helena Sarin. Let me present that to you here.
She's one of my all-time favorite artists and humans.
Yeah, she's the best. And, I love, what she's doing, in the AI space. She also does ceramics. This particular piece here is one that really caught my eye. It's called Sunday Math School for Adults. It exemplifies a sophisticated interplay of geometric abstraction and figurative expression. And that's just something that I, tend to sort of, lean towards, especially on the figurative side. You have those very monochromatic colors that people know Helena for, the red, white, and black. And, it's also animated. I've always said when it comes to digital art, that's something that, let's say trad art or physical art doesn't have, right? It's really taken advantage of the medium here. And it's just something that, I can see on my wall. It's fun, it's a little bit, abstract, it's playful, and it just looks like a really good time. So, that's something that I've really been drawn to as a collector. And, obviously Helena as an artist, I think is just such a wonderful human being. And I've had such a joy, being collecting her over the last couple of months.
Love it. And we're going to later in the show talk more, Seedphrase, about your sort of thesis on AI art relative to generative art. I'm excited to dig into that. This is such a great share. We've worked with Helena a few times now at Proof, and one of the best, as you said.
Amazing.
Okay, Colby, over to you. What sort of recently collected piece, artwork, collection did you want to share?
So I finally became a member of the punk community. in August, and I have wanted a CryptoPunk for so long. Obviously, like many people, punks were my entree into this space. I first started learning about Web3 and blockchain and NFTs again after the Beeple sale happened at Christie's, which I think was the entry point for a lot of people in the traditional art space to come into, or at least start understanding and researching and grasping Web3 NFTs. And, after I guess Beeple was the initial sort of catalyst, CryptoPunks were definitely my onboarding collection. So I've loved punks since the beginning for me, which was in spring of 2021. And just have been obviously, waiting on the sidelines for the last 3.5 years. And then this summer, Danny and I Seedphrase and I have been working together for the last few months, and punks have been top of mind for the last few months. So I finally found my perfect punk, and I couldn't be happier with her. And she makes me smile every day.
Such a good punk. You said your perfect punk. How did you ultimately choose this punk?
Well, there were a few that I was looking at, and it's funny, there was one that I kept going back to, and it was very similar to this lady here, 954. Yeah. And the other one though was tan, and I was like, oh, she would be almost perfect, but I really want a bino. And so this is her, but she's a bino. I've been recently really obsessed with binos. Yeah. And so, she, Noah, who we all know, helped orchestrate the sale. So he was really instrumental, helped coordinate the sale. He knew the individual who, and I think the prior owner had minted this punk. There's very little transaction history. So I'm excited. I'm excited that she's now in my wallet.
I'd like to just cut in there quickly and just say that it's a dev punk as well, which gives it a little bit more added value.
Yes, it's sub 1,000, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, the big caveat here is, Colby, your prior PFP was what?
My prior PFP was a crypto DickButt.
Oh, and you've moved on.
Which I still love, which I absolutely still love, with her little Princess Leia.
Yes, we all know it well.
Hair. So I might switch back to my crypto DickButt at some point, but for right now, my punk is making me really happy.
Yeah, a fair transition. Although, I do love the crypto DickButt. Let's actually segue, Colby, and stay with you here for a moment. You have this amazing and long history on the textiles and fashion side, which of course we'll loop back to later in the show here, and the physical art side. What was it about the digital art space that was perhaps initially the thing that got you most excited outside of that big Beeple sale, or perhaps right afterwards as you started to really dig in? What was it about this space? What is it about the digital art medium that has been so compelling to you?
Well, when I first obviously kind of got introduced to the space, I was a full-time writer. So I had a website called Mini Muse that we actually just sort of relaunched as the publishing media branch to Merch, where I would create original content surrounding the history of art, fashion, architecture, and design. And prior to that, I went to the Gallatin School at NYU, where you design your own major, and it's the School of Interdisciplinary Study. So it's all about mixing time periods, categories, mediums, and creating sort of this really interdisciplinary approach in the sense of Gallatin to, your education. For Mini Muse, I was doing that through original content. So when I started kind of immersing myself in Web3 and the NFT space, what really excited me was not only learning about the space, but thinking about all of the different application mechanisms and opportunities to bring sort of this holistic vision of fashion into Web3, which is, what we've been doing with Merch. So I'm always interested in learning about new technologies, new mechanics, and really thinking similar to how I applied these ideas to original content at Mini-Muse, where I would look at a runway collection and I would analyze it through the lens of, historical architecture. For me, it was learning about NFTs, Web3 at the time, the metaverse, blockchain, and really thinking about all these different techniques or application mechanisms through which I can merge this super new and exciting space with aspects of traditional fashion.
Love it. And Colby, you sort of as a family have such a renowned physical art collection. I'm curious, at home, what are those conversations like about digital art? Is there skepticism, excitement, curiosity? What's sort of the nature of those conversations, if you can describe that?
My husband teaches me things every day, as much as I try and teach him about what I'm doing. He's so excited and intrigued in the space. He's a huge fan of what Beeple does. We love Mike and his brother. And I think in terms of CryptoPunks, what has also really interested my husband about the punk collection in particular are all the parallels that can be drawn to the history of portraiture, specifically Warhol's portrait. So Warhol's society portrait. So that was an immediate connection that, sort of we both made and that we love talking about and we love unpacking. So, he's super interested in the space, loves learning about the space, and also is really supportive of a lot of artists in the space.
Yeah, so fascinating. Seedphrase, coming over to you and I had a conversation maybe a month ago now, and we were talking a little bit about the way that you build your collection, the large collection that it certainly is. And one of the things you mentioned is that you like to collect from artists where you feel like you can perhaps add value or help amplify that artist or that collection. Can you unpack that a little bit more for the audience?
Yeah, sure. Like, I think, the hardest thing on X or any social platform is, it's an attention economy, right? And it's very hard for, some of these, upcoming artists to be able to, get that. And, when I resonate with a certain collection or an artist, part of my understanding is that if I collect their art, I want to somehow add some value back to them as well. Not only do I just want to collect and be silent, but I want to be able to use my platform to be able to, elevate them and to help them, get into, exhibitions and museums. Just recently, I donated Tyler Hobbs to LACMA, for example. That's a clear example of, my mission and, what I want to do, because I think it's really important, that we have people in this, very, very small, community of ours, really, building those bridges, building those bridges more to traditional art. The whole digital art space is still very, insignificant in size compared to the traditional art market. Yeah. And, I do have a large platform on X. And I think it's just very helpful to be able to get as many of these artists out there as possible, especially ones that I think, are struggling to really, get any traction, on some of their artworks. And it's always been, a core principle of mine to, really uplift and promote, certain artists that I think, are worthy. And I think that have, fantastic art, but it just doesn't have enough eyes on it. Sure.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned when we talked the other day that the collection by Martin Brasser, which I deeply love, is one of those examples. Seedphrase, coming back to you for a moment, I'm curious, you have such an impressive generative art collection, and you've amassed that over time, and you're now very much leaning into the AI art side of things. You showed this work from Helena at the top of the show. Can you distill and talk about your thesis of perhaps focusing now on AI art in some of the similar ways you did with generative art quite early?
Yeah, look, I've been trading cryptocurrencies for over 11 years now. So I think I've taken a lot of what I've learned, from, trading into collecting as well. You know, in the sense that, like, you know, I am a very large, you know, fundamentalist. You know, like if I'm, you know, if I'm collecting something, you know, it has to have some sort of, you know, like ground into it, right? You know, some sort of like foundational reason for me to, you know, want to, you know, get involved. And, you know, I think, you know, I correctly spotted, you know, the generative art trend quite early, you know, and especially with, you know, autoglyphs. You know, I bought the full set of autoglyphs. I think it was in 2020, September. And then, you know, a year later, you know, what I paid for an entire set, I think, you know, that's what just one autoglyph was worth.
Yeah.
So, you know, very quickly identified that generative art, you know, had at the time a very small market cap. You know, it was something that hadn't really been done before. And, you know, that's also, you know, what I've also identified with AI art. I think that, you know, with time, we are already seeing that, you know, with ChatGPT and, you know, all of these other, you know, big, you know, language models that are being released, that, you know, AI, whether we like it or not, is going to be, you know, directly, you know, affecting each one of us, you know, in our day-to-day lives. You know, whether we know it or not, it's going to be on every single person's phone. You're going to be using it day to day. It's just going to continue to grow in relevance. So with that in mind, you know, I think AI art, especially when you consider the market capitalization compared to generative art, I think AI is around, I think it's around like 100 million market cap when you all collections currently. And when you look at, you know, the generative art market cap, I think it's a little bit over $1 billion. So even for AI just to match where generative art is right now, you know, that's a 10x. And I personally think, you know, AI is, it already is, but, you know, it's going to revolutionize every single aspect of our lives. And I can see, you know, a lot of people who are, you know, touched by AI, you know, getting more involved in it and getting more interested in, you know, this movement, because I think it's just such an incredible tech. And yeah, so that's really why I'm really fascinated in AI right now, because I think, you know, it still has a lot of upside potential. And I just really love the idea of, you know, like machines creating art, you know, machines thinking, you know, generating this.
Well, Seedphrase, and we'll move on in just a moment, but Seedphrase, I appreciate the way that your thesis is sort of baked in these fundamentals that refer to market cap and potential upside, but you're able to blend that with a deep appreciation aesthetically and visually and emotionally with the work that you collect. We heard that at the top of the show when you were describing the Helena work, of course. So cool to see sort of those two frames of reference and states of mind coming together in your collecting approach. Let's now sort of dovetail into the core topic and reason we're here, which is the blending of fashion with digital art. Maybe Colby, starting with you, why is fashion and why are garments like we're all wearing an interesting vector to you for expressing and sharing digital art?
I mean, for me personally, fashion is how I see the world. Even the work that Seedphrase shared earlier, I mean, I immediately think of Oskar Schlemmer's Triadic Ballet, which was these crazy Bauhaus ballet costumes. So it's unfortunately or fortunately, that's how my eyes revert to seeing the world through fashion tinted lenses. So it was a really exciting challenge and opportunity for me. You know, when I started thinking about how I wanted to enter the space, what my footprint could look like in the space, you know, back in spring of 2021, kind of through that summer, I had first discovered art blocks in August of 2021. And I started learning about generative art and becoming really fascinated by generative art, not only in terms of, you know, the artwork that's being created, but the process through which it's being created. And, you know, thinking about historically how important obviously the invention of the camera was to the art world. It sort of opened up the meaning of artists to not only include painters and sculptors and draftsmen, but also photographers. And so thinking about in, 100 years from now, how instrumental to, in my mind, it will be that, generative art will have a place similar to how photography affected the future of art. Today, an artist is not only a photographer or a painter or a sculptor, but they're coders. So, for me, that was a big aha moment. And then kind of thinking about using that as a means of figuring out what I wanted to do in the space. I started, kind of dissecting generative art, scarcity, kind of how these collections are made up, and thinking about, gosh, there's so many similarities to fashion and to obviously the traditional art world, just in terms of, provenance, scarcity, the one-of-one aspect to generative art, and thinking about how we can apply some of those same functions or mentalities or mechanics to fashion, specifically to physical garments. And as much as I have a history and love of fashion, I never ever wanted to be a fashion designer in the traditional sense. So I didn't necessarily know all of the complexities to manufacturing one-of-one product at scale. And I had a number of conversations with industry veterans, people who have had 20, 30, 40-year careers in fashion, explaining to them, like, this is my idea. Can you believe no one's ever done this before? And they're like, I can believe no one's ever done this before. It's just can't be done. And I just would not take no for an answer. So it was really exciting to think about all of these mechanics that are really, kind of emblematic or, really native to the Web3 space, and thinking about how we can apply those to physical products, specifically in the category of fashion.
I love it. And Colby, staying with you for a moment, I know when you did the merch opening or the pop-up, I think it was at NFT NYC this past year, this year in the spring, if I'm not mistaken, you had Ashley Olsen and Mark Jacobs. You had these people who are very deeply immersed in the fashion world or fashion designers themselves come to that event. What elements of merch and digital art and Web3 either sort of resonate with them and they get it, or are like a really hard sell? Tell me a little bit about sort of those interactions with people deeply immersed in the fashion world.
What's been so exciting to see is how supportive everyone has been. And to your point, Eli, how interested and inquisitive they've all been, but to different aspects of the concept. So while they might not entirely grasp it until, I sit down and explain it to them, some are really interested in how did we manufacture these garments? Some are really interested in how did we not only manufacture them, but at the highest level of quality that we've achieved, which is, another sort of added bonus or layer of complexity. And then others have been really interested actually in the NFC functionality. So every merch hoodie comes with an NFC chip where you access what we're calling your wearable wallet. So that was sort of the biggest, I think, advancement in the last year from kind of what the vision of merch was for, the 2.5 years prior to launch versus what the vision of merch today and into the future is, which is, the redemption of the physical rather than symbolizing the end of the product journey is really only the beginning. So we're excited to introduce a number of different forms of utility to our holders and to our physical products through the NFC chip and through the wearable wallet.
Yeah, I mean, it's such if you were a total fly on the wall and knew nothing about Web3 and NFC chips, the notion that a garment, a hoodie, could have some sort of additional life to it and some additional, as you use the word, utility, is a pretty wild and novel notion altogether, but very cool. Let's talk about the release that Seedphrase, you and Colby and Merch have coming up next week. Things are kicking off this week, of course. I love the way that you guys always involve artists, and some of my favorites die with Claire Silver. Give us the overview of this drop number 2, the hoodies that you guys are wearing and showing off so beautifully. Give us a little rundown.
Well, I think, as you mentioned, Eli, in April, we had our launch event for the Genesis drop. Seedphrase so generously let us display his full set of autoglyphs. So that sort of was the beginning of a much larger conversation and collaboration between Merch and Seedphrase. So what really was exciting is to think about how we can take his CryptoPunk, the most iconic, rarest punk of the series, and how we can create a collection around it that was really about abstracting elements of the punk and sort of distilling it down to color, traits, and how we can bring in all of these different collaborators to help bring that vision to life. So, to Seedphrase's point before, and our, kind of conviction in the future of AI art, we partnered with Claire Silver, who we both hugely respect and collect. And Claire did all the original artwork for this drop. And then I brought in Swarovski, which is another amazing partner we have. Swarovski is working with us on 22 of the 322 hoodie outputs. We'll have Swarovski cord ends. These don't, but they will. So Swarovski's doing 22 of the cord ends based off of 5 different traits of Seedphrase's punk. So the hat, the cigarette, the earring, the glasses, and the buck teeth. The hat, cigarette, earrings, and glasses are all Swarovski crystal set in sterling silver. But the buck teeth, there's 2 hoodie outputs that have the buck teeth cord ends. Those are Swarovski created diamonds, hand set in 14 karat white gold. So that's really exciting. And then we're actually doing a sale at Christie's. So we're doing an auction at Christie's for 5 of the hoodies. One of the pieces of feedback we got after the Genesis drop was certain collectors said, they would have paid a price premium to be guaranteed a super rare output. And also I had my fashion friends that were like, how do I buy these things? We are partnering with Christie's, bringing 5 of these ultra rare Swarovski hoodies to market prior to our public mint, which will take place on October 2nd.
I love it. Well, I mean, Seedphrase, coming over to you, this in many respects, as Colby just said, this collection is oriented around your punk. Give us a little background, like what's the genesis story of your acquisition of that punk? I was looking at the transaction history the other day, and I think the first sale was for an ETH or 2. You said the other day on X or Twitter that the going price now is, I think, $1 billion. Anything less is FUD. But we'll sort of transition into your vault and looking at that piece for a moment here. Give us a little background on your acquisition and why that piece in particular is meaningful to you.
Yeah, look, I'm someone who is, all or nothing. When I discover, a new collection, that I like, I always have very high conviction and I want the rarest. And back then, on the CryptoPunks website, you can actually see, which traits were what. I didn't even know that there was even a 7-trait punk. Just had the actual attributes themselves, but they weren't numbered or anything. So it was a little bit harder to navigate. And I had to really rely on the Discord. I was in the Discord. Asking around, what is the rarest punk? A few people said aliens, but time and time again, everyone kept saying there's this one punk that has 7 traits. And I just thought, I have to get it. So it was a lot of back and forth, with Go West Bitcoin, who was the holder before me. And, it was just a timing thing, we had very similar collecting styles. But he had been holding on for a long time, and obviously they didn't get the traction that he had foreseen. And basically, at the time he was liquidating, and, it was just a matter of, good timing by me to, enter the punk space. So, I ended up buying, a lot of his bag. Because, again, like we have a very similar like thesis on collecting. And yeah, that's basically how I, got the 7 Trade Punk. I needed something that, not only was rare, but, represented me as well. And, there was a few like, 6 trade outputs, some are nice, some are quite ugly. They're not aesthetic. The trades don't really work well together.
Sure.
And when I saw the 7 trade, my mind just started to go all over the place. I was thinking like, wow, this guy, could be like a mobster or some sort of like boss. Like he's got the cigarette, he's got the top hat, the big beard. I just think, everything worked, aesthetically wise. I just really loved the punk. I thought he looked so cool. And yeah, that's basically, the reasoning behind why, I got the punk.
Yeah.
And, why I've rocked it as my, my PFP since.
Yeah, it's great. And you also rock it as when you're DJing, right? When you're performing, that becomes part of your persona, right?
Yeah, correct. So, in 2021, it was one of the first NFT NYCs that I attended. And, a good friend of mine was, he was throwing a big party, like Blondish, Don Diablo, Steve Aoki, Troy Boy, they were all playing. And, he just said to me, he's like, why don't we bring Seedphrase to life? And it hadn't really crossed my mind at that point to, like really bring this out into the real world.
Sure.
It was very much just a digital first project of mine. And, obviously I had gotten a lot of traction, that year as well, going from someone who was like anon to suddenly, all these news publications reaching out to me, asking me about, NFTs and collecting and, why is this whole space, blowing up? And I just said to him, sure, like, let's do it, and he had the contacts to Marshmallow's team about, getting a helmet made. And it was just meant to be like this like one-time event, I was just going to show up in this helmet and, show people, the world, Seedphrase, living, breathing Seedphrase. And it was just the most surreal moment. The New York Times was there. Disney was filming a documentary that they, interviewed me on as well. And just seeing people's faces, like with this helmet on, it really made me realize that, I really have something here. And, there's such a strong brand. It's, as Colby said, it's so iconic. So many people know this particular punk. And that's what really drove me to, really create something out of this as well. I just wanted to, get this out there and, use this as a conduit to bridge this digital world, more with this like physical world that, doesn't really know a whole lot about NFTs, while also exploring that malleable nature between digital and physical.
Yeah, so well said. And Colby, as we close the show here, let's go into your vault. We saw the recently acquired punk at the top of the show. Let's go into your vault for a second. What's one other artwork or collection that you want to share?
So I am going to share, again, something that's near and dear to my heart, which is my Chromie Squiggle. Actually, so my original logo for my website, Mini Muse, was this, now we're calling it the Noodle, but this previously known as the Squiggle. And I developed this logo because I discovered, so Alexander Calder, who was an American sculptor from the 20th century, he produced about 1,000 pieces of unique jewelry throughout his career. And within that was a series called the Initial Brooches. So he would create brooches for friends and family, and he would render the intended wearer's initials in the brooch design. So I saw one that he had made that he had an M, and it was a very curvilinear M. So that's how I first sort of came up with the design for my Mini Muse logo. And then when we were kind of rebranding for merch, we made that, in similar style, 2 M's, but more geometric. So with sharper edges and just a little bit more, feels more for the space, feels a little techie. So when I saw this Chromie Squiggle, I thought, oh my gosh, that's merch. That's my merch M. So I was really excited to be able to acquire the Squiggle. And again, similar to how, I think every artwork has some story to their, every collector. And so similar to, wanting to find my perfect punk, I felt like this was my perfect Squiggle.
So good. I love that each of the sort of the lower bound of each of them sort of lands in the same place. Basically, most Squiggles sort of have more deviation there.
Yeah.
Great squig. And again, I like how both of you are sort of pulling these digital artifacts out into the real world in these different manifestations in very diverse ways. It's really cool to see. I think it's, as you both said throughout this show, much needed as a way to express these wholly digital works otherwise to new audiences. Okay, so October 2nd, the public mint for Drop 2 opens. I'm sure that's on the merch website, and all the information, Colby, would be on Twitter. Is that the best place to send people?
Twitter, Discord, merch, mmerch.xyz. The Christie sale that I had mentioned earlier with the 5 Swarovski outputs, that is live on September 25th.
Yep.
And runs to 10 a.m. October 2nd. And then our allow list window actually corresponds with the final 24 hours of the Christie sale. So allow list opens at 10 a.m. October 1st. Both allow list and Christie's close at 10 a.m. October 2nd. And then public mint opens at 11 a.m. Eastern October 2nd.
Love it. The sequencing, I've done a number of releases. The sequencing of those different moments in a sale is always fun to construct and put together. It sounds like you've both been very thoughtful about those different beats in that story.
I'm going to call you next time to help us construct. Because the amount of hours we've spent constructing, trying to construct. But I'm hoping, look, I always have wood near me to knock on. So I'm hoping it goes well. The response we've been getting so far has been really positive. Collectors are excited. So I hope it goes well.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Well, pleasure to have you both on. Great conversation. 2 great collectors now creating in net new ways. Seedphrase, Colby, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.